Hi folks, I haven't been doing much painting, but I have set up the, the sort of Arnhem board that I've got. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the airborne were separated down the centre with the sort of famous action in Arnhem itself, and then there's actually quite a large, well, almost like a battle outside Arnhem to the west, and the town escapes my mind, but I think it starts with a O. But that sort of area, the paras were dug in, and that's also where the Polish airborne tried to go and sort of extra extra diet, or try and get them out of there. Got the, the, the Red Devils on this corner. I've got some oil drums. I don't know if they did have some oil supplies, but I think it was largely howitzers, mortars, Piats, infantry, and this book by Anthony Beevor. Well, guys, it's really a must-read. I think I've said recently that I've gone through it, but it's just spectacular. It goes in with a lot of detail, and it's made me want to read a lot more into it. I like the sort of human aspect that Anthony Beevor tries, well, he tries to include a lot of that into his books. So I finished that now. I'm sort of hungry for more. At least it's enthused me to do wargaming the Operation Market Garden, and this is a nice excuse for doing some defensive action. Sometimes you see the British airborne being used a lot on the offensive, especially in, well, for D-Day and that sort of campaign, and having to seize bridges and things like that. But they were definitely dug in outside Arnhem. I'm sorry that the name escapes my mind. I'll probably remind you in another video, but I've got a map of this area, and the Germans eventually did sort of, well, enclose them into some sort of large pocket. I think it was some kilometre wide at its sort of widest part, but that's probably when it was getting gradually worse. In terms of wargaming it, I still only got the 2x4 unfortunately, but I've tried to pack as much as I can into it. You had the sort of SS Panzer divisions and things. When I was reading the book, I got the impression that sometimes it's overstated how prepared the Germans were. They were really in retreat. They weren't like crack SS Panzer divisions already there, and it was a massive fault in that sense. It definitely was a gamble, but the Panzer divisions were, the panzers that actually made a difference were actually brought in by train quite late, I know, during the operation. So it's a bit of a misconception to think that, sorry, I should be focusing on the tiger rolling up the road. It's a bit of a misconception to think that, well, that they were already there and that should have been seen. It was quite, well, as always with these sort of things, you kind of, when you really read into it, you see how close and how narrow a thing it was. It perhaps was a bridge too far, but it was also possible, I think. And the sort of thing that you see at the end in the film, of course, is when they're on top of the tower and just sort of listing the reasons why it didn't succeed. And, well, overall I don't think it was a success, but sort of maybe why we love wargaming it is just such an audacious gamble, and if it had succeeded, it would have succeeded so spectacularly. I suppose in a sense, if they're the same sort of people who had planned D-Day, maybe it was running off of that, that they thought that they could do it, or was it some sort of, they thought it was the same tenacity, but it maybe a bit too much that time. But I'm not sure if it's too much of a ramble, but I do think in war that sort of thing maybe does need to be done. I suppose And the obverse of that is that Hitler would do very similar things, and as the war dragged on, those sort of gambles became more ridiculous and almost fantasy. But at the beginning of the war, of going through around the Maginot Line and things right at the beginning to invade France, and that, you know, that kind of thing can pay off, and when it does pay off, it's just absolutely spectacular. There's a few things here that I've brought in terrain-wise. The barbed wire stretchers are from Mel the Terrain Tutor. I bought a job lot of his sort of, well, you know, his videos. He's done these barbed wire stretchers, and for the Vietnam War I've got a lot of his old terrain which he's created on his channel, and I bought a job lot of that. He was selling a building as well. I didn't buy the building, but the budget just did stretch the barbed wire stretchers, and then I've got a lot of entrenchments for the Vietnam War. They're quite period set because they've got things like, oh, if I show them, I think you guys will understand it. It looks a bit more like terrain for the Vietnam War, but I'm sure after stretch I could use them for this. I've got some pieces here which I've had for donkey's years. These two I bought at Penarth when I was very young, and the sort of ruined Churchill over there, that's a piece that I've done recently then, on an old CD base. And this is the sort of spectacular resin building I bought after Bring By. It was looking a bit worse for wear. It was actually, it's either been split in half or something. It was ridiculously cheap. I think it would normally go for about £35 or something, but I've got it for a £5 at the Bring By, and it just painted an absolute dream. I noticed with Dan Bowman's, I hope you have got your name right there. I really like his channel. I've been following that for a while now, and he's been doing a few focuses on terrain. I think he got some resin buildings recently, because he was mentioning the sort of the little white bits you get sometimes on resin, the sort of offshoots or something. When you paint those up, they're quite odd. They're like a spongy, weird consistency. It might not have been down actually. I'm not 100%, but it might have been on some. I'm sure it was on some terrain. I'm not sure about that now. But I painted it up. You can sort of see that little odd white bit that is sticking out, and that's a bit annoying. I just need to run over some paint to it, and I'm sure that'll be fine. And yeah, that's the setup that I've got at the moment. Hoping that I can wargame this soon. When my mate Owen comes over, I can do that. I'm going to be joining Carmarthen Club soon as well. They're called the Carmarthen Old Guard. I've made this long hedge piece using draft excluder. Now that is something that's worth checking out. Let's see. There we go. Hopefully that's focused in. I need to improve my technique, but that's essentially what James Welsh Wargaming was doing with his, and I think Luke's APS has sort of had the same idea as well. I think he's got an old video on it. To buy a litre or so of that and cut it up into stretches. As it happened, I had an old plywood section that I've just used as one long section, and that's been quite convenient for me. I had an awful time trying to stick it down. I used super glue and bicarb. Seemed like maybe I could have roughed it up with some scoring with a Stanley knife or something. Maybe that would have given it a bit of a surface. I think as it was a bit too glossy to stick. And the actual bottom of the draft excluder is like a glossy plastic, so they're not the most well, adherent of things. So you can either score both sides. I would try and do that. Any surface that's going to stick, and if it is like this, not very good at sticking, just score it as much as you can. And maybe because it's curled up in a sort of circle when you receive this sort of draft excluder in the post, maybe just cut it into like 6-inch sections. That's what James did, and I sort of foolishly didn't do that. I just did one long piece, and that was an absolute pain to stick down. And I got my fingers absolutely just glued together. The bicarb trick is very strong with super glue. It does make it much stronger, but it's awful if you get it on your hands. And then you just PVA through that. I did some PVA and sand for a ground texture, brown acrylic paint and dry brush that, and then it's had some grass scatter from Jarvis, which has got little bits of stones in there, and some plump foliage. I bought that to do sort of roads and things. The actual road sections, I bought these. James has bought some as well. We were using them a lot down in Cardiff, and they're really reasonable. Some guy does it out in the countryside, I don't know, some rural area in England, and they're just fantastic. He does crossroad sections. It's all on eBay. You might have come across them if you're just searching for 28mm roads. I think he does 15mm sections as well, and I was just amazed at the price. He posts them very reasonably, and you get like 4 sections for £7 or something. I couldn't make them for cheaper, I don't think. Especially when you think of time. I can paint a lot in an hour, but other people, you know, if that's all he does is terrain, sometimes it's worth relegating, you know, because I largely paint miniatures. If I do a commission, then I'm happy to, you know, I get £7. It's not an awful lot when I've done a big commission or something. I'm happy to pay for some roads. Definitely worth thinking sometimes, just, you know, pay someone else, unless you're sort of desperately on a budget, then it's worth looking for methods to do it yourself. It's definitely been quite the ramble. I'm tempted to run this up to 12 minutes just to see if it cuts off. There's a sort of moment of truth is coming up in 30 seconds now. What I did was turned off a setting, which was it was to do with sort of auto turn off, or it was something like that. And fingers crossed, we'll have another 30 seconds after that, because Ralph was telling me to mess around with the settings or something, and there's definitely something going on there. And yeah, I think I've shown pretty much the large board. The resin pieces here are very nice. They're any scale models, and you can actually just use emulsion paint straight on them, which makes them just fantastic. They have had a wash in hot soapy water, but the wood is just like a chocolate cream or something from who does that now? Just Wilco, or yeah, Wilco Emulsions, the tester pots. Oh, the moment truth is coming up. Let's see if it cuts off. Oh, I think it's been cutting off at 12:28. I think that might have fixed it. I'm not going to hold my breath until I've gone to 13 minutes now. Thanks for bearing with me. I need to get more jeeps and